Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video, and in this video we're back talking about Big Brother Canada. We're here, I'm back with a cast assessment for Big Brother Canada 12, which is set up to be a really strange season, where we have most of the cast. We have 12 of the 14 players from this season, again, 14 less than normal. But a big change up for this season is that we got 2 mystery all-stars on this cast, which makes this weird, as I believe this is the first time I'm ever doing a cast assessment without the full cast. But either way, we're still going to do it here. We're going to be running through the 12 players that we have announced so far, and also talk about who I think the mystery house guests are, and also give my winner pick for the season. Now I should mention, along with the announcement of the season, we did also get the announcement that we're once again not getting feeds, and we're just getting digital dailies, which is really lame. Along with the fact that the show now has a record-breaking amount of sponsors, because I definitely care so much about that. And all of which, disappointing news here, but it was kind of what I expected coming from it. But anyway, I mean, let's talk about the cast itself, which I do like this cast based on what we're seeing. I mean, like, it's not anything too special, though. I mean, it very much just feels like a typical BB Can cast. It feels like the type of people that you would expect to be on from season to season. Though I'll say with that, no one is really standing out. Like, obviously, we do have these returnees that we will talk about, but outside of that, I don't feel like anyone here feels like this very clear front runner to win, to where I think it makes it interesting when I'm gonna eventually pick my winner pick, as I don't really feel super secure in where I'm gonna go. And now it's me from the future, where since the recording of this video, but before the video actually came out, we did get the announcement that Ibrahim, a member of this cast, did end up dropping out and has now been replaced with Tola. And while in many situations in the past I would have just edited out Ibrahim from the video and added Tola in, I do feel like Ibrahim plays a major factor into the later cast assessment, to where it just would have been a pain to do that. So straight up, the rest of this video from this point on will just play as is. It is just as if Ibrahim is on the cast. However, we are obviously going to talk about Tola here, who is now actually on the cast. And Tola is a 40-year-old fiber optic technician, and someone that, as of right now, I've not seen any videos from him. All we got is the bio, and through that it becomes very tough to really assess how they're going to play. Though, through his bio, I feel like he answers most things right. I feel like his bio seems fine for the most part. I mean, it seems like he recognizes the importance of a social game, talks about wanting to be a master manipulator, talks about wanting to win at all costs. Obviously, he's married, so no showmance. I think that is a bit of a red flag, the fact that he talks about being a master manipulator, but then also says that he's going to play with physical strength, be a competition beast, but also saying that he's going to play under the radar. And it's like, again, there are conflicting messages there, but really, obviously, Tola is someone that I don't know anything about. We literally just got his bio at the time of this recording, to where, again, not someone I'm going to pick as my winner pick, obviously. Though I do think, interestingly, with the absence of Ibrahim and with the inclusion of Tola, I do think this gives even more power to the woman clique that I will be talking a lot about in the cast assessment. I assume is actually going to have the numbers coming into this, to where I think it's another knock against the more bro-y guys, to where I think it just further enforces where I think this season is going to go. But with that, again, those are my thoughts on Tola. Again, the video from this point on will continue as is. It will just continue with what I originally recorded, as if Ibrahim is there, with Ibrahim's section still going to be included in, because why not? So again, let's just continue on with the rest of the video. Anyway, I will be running through the cast in alphabetical order of first name. Again, we're going to start off with the 12 people that we know for sure are on the cast, starting it off with Avery. And Avery is someone that I actually do feel pretty decent about. I mean, she is kind of in the perfect age for Big Brother, being 26 in the late 20s. I feel like that's kind of the perfect age for Big Brother, where you do have some life experience by that point, while also not being too old to not really gel with a lot of the younger members of the cast. I do feel like she seems to perfectly fit in that light. While beyond that, again, she seems to have all these skills for the game. I mean, she is someone that comes off to me as a very well-rounded player, someone that is a fan of the show, someone that seems to be someone that would be good socially. I can see her doing decent enough in challenges. Like, in many ways, she kind of comes off as like a Casey light, where like that's kind of the vibes I get from her. Now, again, I don't think she's as physical as Casey was, where Casey was obviously a former athlete. I don't feel like Avery is in that ballpark, but Avery is someone that I definitely could see doing pretty well, especially with this specific cast, as we'll talk about, where at least before the returnees get added to it, I do feel like this cast feels like one that is very aware of the recent paradigm shift of a lot of bro-y guys really running the show and winning the game, to where I think, considering how aware people are of that, I think Avery is someone that could excel from that meta. Though I will say there are some pretty big red flags, particularly particularly the fact that she keeps on talking about wanting to play the game without giving up your values and play the game this moral way, which I do think that is a bit questionable to me. Now, again, not completely writing her off, as I don't think that means that she's not going to play the game strategically in any light, though I do think it might stop her from making these like super cutthroat moves, but I still feel pretty good about Avery in the grand scheme of things. So again, I'm moving her on as a potential winner pick. Next up, moving on to Bailey, a 34-year-old bartender who is someone that really comes off here as probably one of the most aggressive personalities on the show. I mean, she is someone that is seemingly very direct and very straightforward, and someone that I am very much anticipating being a big character on the season. But I don't know how she's going to go as a player. I do think she's someone that I'm a bit puzzled by. I do believe she is a fan of the show, though. But a lot of her answers in her bio are extremely short and do feel mostly shallow. I see that she wants to play an under the radar strategy. I don't really see her personality really gelling with that. Now, I do think at the end of the day, I do think this is a cast that is actually beneficial for her. Again, as I mentioned earlier, she is one of these people that is aware of how bro-y BB Can has become, to where with multiple people on this cast seeming to want to gather the women and want the women to win the show, I feel like Bailey could potentially be in a decent spot because of that, though at the same time is seemingly very outspoken and could potentially put this bigger target on her back through that, and could also become this figurehead for the men as the main person that's coming for them, to where I do feel like that is a worry for Bailey here, to where at the end of the day, I don't feel particularly great about Bailey. I feel like she's someone that is pretty high variance. Again, I think you could definitely find her group, and that group could be the majority, but I do think at the end of the day, I feel like she is someone that is probably going to be a big target on the board, and someone that is a pretty aggressive personality, to where I don't really have much faith in her long-term on this season. Next up, moving on to Dennis, a 48-year-old textile designer who is the oldest person on this cast. And I actually really do like Dennis. I feel like Dennis is someone that I really want to do well on this season. I mean, he is a big fan of the show. He does talk about wanting to be a villain on the show, which, I mean, in essence, does give me very Pop and Paul Jackson vibes, which is a bit of a worry. But again, I think, as I mentioned, with the meta of, I think, the bro-y guys are going to be called out right away, I do feel like Dennis could find himself in a majority group early on in the season. I do worry for him long-term, though. I mean, again, at the end of the day, he is the oldest person on this cast. He is someone that does feel like an outlier on this cast, to where I think he is someone that could be potentially expendable. I think beyond that, he does talk about how he needs time to recharge, and I do worry for him socially in that light, especially long-term, to where I do worry about him just simply not being social enough. So again, I do think there definitely are worry points for Dennis here, and he's someone that I do really want to do well, at least. Again, he is someone that is a big fan, talks a big game, so while I don't actually have much faith in him actually executing, he is someone that I do want to see at least try, so at least that'll be something. But with that, we'll then move on to Donna Marshall, a 26-year-old artist, and Donna just feels kind of fine for me, and where, I mean, she really doesn't stand out too much to me. I mean, she very much feels kind of in this Shania sort of mold, or maybe in an Esty from BB Can 7. Again, these people that I actually end up picking as my winner pick on those respective seasons, but just someone that, again, feels like this typical Big Brother casting choice. Again, 26 years old, obviously attractive, looking for a showmance, seems to have a decent head on her shoulders, but not too any extreme. And straight up, this was an earlier season of the show. I do think Donna is someone that I probably would have picked as my winner pick, again, in line with the Paris, the Estes, even though, again, to be fair, she's not as big of a fan seemingly as them. But again, I think with BB Can 11, we did see Ty just completely dominate the challenges from beginning to end, and I do think challenges are going to matter more, to where I don't know if Donna is someone that's screaming out to me as someone that is going to win a lot of challenges. Also doesn't scream out as the most strategically minded person here, to where she seems fine. I mean, she's definitely someone that typically I probably would at least have as a contender, though she's one that just doesn't really stand out to me in the grand scheme of things, so I didn't end up moving her on. Next up, moving on to Elijah, and Elijah for me here very much feels like them trying to recreate Kevin Jacobs. Again, has this very similar look, is at a similar-ish age at 31, and also clearly being a super fan of the show, talking up a similar-ish strategy to Kevin, and wanting to find a ride or die, and divide and conquer, which, I mean, to be fair, I guess is more so in line with someone like Daniel Reyes and Jason Guy, but again, I think you can kind of see that early on from Kevin and Helena. So where, again, I think that's very much the vibe he's giving off. I don't know if he's coming off as much of a villain as Kevin, but still, I think he's definitely trying to play the game like Kevin, and I just don't think it's going to work. I mean, I don't know how they let a guy that looks just like Kevin play a similar style of game just 2 seasons later. Again, it would be pretty insane to me if that were to happen. To where, even beyond that, I don't feel like Elijah really fits in with this cast. I feel like with this cast, there is this like decent chunk of these like broy guys. There's this like other offshoot of like the women that are talking about wanting a woman to win and working with the women in gays. Well, there's also this offset of like the women that want showmances. And I feel like Elijah kind of fits into like none of those groupings, to where he very much just feels like someone that doesn't fit into this cast. Now, again, I think there is a potential way of him finding himself as like a floater in the game and navigating through the game in that way, but similar to like a Joel in BB Can 4. But I don't know if I feel particularly confident about that. To where, again, I think in a post Kevin Jacobs world, he's just someone I don't really have much faith in. So again, I'm not moving him on as a winner pick. Next up, moving on to Ibrahim. And Ibrahim is a really interesting figure here, and the fact that he is pretty much the prototypical BB Can winner. Again, coming from the likes of the 2 Ties and even like a Dane, like Ibrahim very much feels in that mold of this like very physical guy, seemingly pretty social, has a decent head on his shoulders. Now, again, not to any extreme. I don't really get the sense that he is a big super fan of the show and that he knows the game inside and out, though he does seem like a pretty competent all-around player. So again, he's the type of player that has been winning out in recent seasons. Again, the type of person that wins these endgame comps. And mixing out the fact that he seems to be very aware how important the social game is, again, I could very much see Ibrahim doing very well. I am decently high on Ibrahim here, to where he seems like the person that would probably be the most palatable of the broy guys to these other factions in the game, to where, again, I do very much see him doing pretty well. So again, I'm moving him on as a potential winner pick. Next up, moving on to Janine, a 44-year-old makeup artist, the oldest woman on the cast here, and is a figure that I'm pretty conflicted on, where I am high on Janine. I do feel like Janine is someone that knows the game pretty well. I believe she does claim to be a super fan. She does also articulate a pretty strong strategy in kind of what has become the meta over the last few years, even though too for I think recently has been doing as well. But either way, the meta of like winning the first HOH and building this like 8-person alliance and creating an onion structure, and again, she is seemingly very aware of what to do in the game, along with the fact that, again, she is a hair and makeup artist. Or, I mean, if you've been following my other cast assessments for other recent shows, that is an occupation I'm pretty high on. Again, one that I think implies some social skills, considering how much you have to interact with people one-on-one through that occupation, to where, again, I think there's a lot to like there, and she is on the older side of things. Now, I don't think that's a big detriment on this cast, where, again, I do think she is going to find herself an alliance. I mean, she is one of the other people that is talking about wanting the women to win, to where, again, it seems like there's other like-minded people to her on this cast, to where, again, I do think she is going to find herself in a group. She seems to be someone that could do decent in challenges. Like, in a way, she kind of reminds me of like Tara to a degree. It's like archetype-wise, toward Tara ended up winning some comps towards the end game, and I can kind of see that for Janine as well. But again, I do think there is some inconsistency in like what she's talking about, where like she does mention that she wants to do this big 8-person alliance and have side alliances, and then also says that she's trying to make this the most entertaining season for Canadians, which doesn't really work, as obviously the 8-person alliance is the most boring thing you could do. And even beyond that, I mean, she talks a lot about wanting to make this an entertaining show, which does make me worry that she's a bit too focused on that and too focused on like how Canada is going to perceive her, to where, and I think there are those red flags, but someone I do feel pretty good about. And like Shreya, I'm only going to move on 3 people as a potential winner pick in this video, considering the smaller cast here, but she was my 4th. I did very much consider her, but again, not someone I am moving on here. Next up, moving on to Kayla, a 26-year-old volleyball coach, and someone that, coming into just seeing the cast on paper and seeing the occupations, she was my first winner pick. She was the person that I looked at and was like, this person seems perfect for Big Brother Canada. I mean, someone that is, again, of the perfect age, again, late-ish 20s, someone that seemingly is physical. Again, she's a former volleyball player. She's now a volleyball coach. She's someone that I could see being very good socially, and seems to be someone that is going to play the game hard. She is talking about willing to cut her showmans. And again, like, everything there feels really good on paper, but I think there are some red flags. where despite her talking about wanting to cut her showman, she does also talk about how it's more important to maintain her integrity than win at all costs. She talks about how she's going to be more honest than being a manipulator. She also has some like red flags in her bio that don't scream out as much as she's had as much life experience as you would think that she would have, where I don't really know what to think of Kayla. I think she's someone that does give me these red flags here. While she is like perfect on the offset, I think when reading through her bio, I just got red flag after red flag to where as much as I did initially want to actually pick her as my winner pick, I just feel like my opinion of her just started to slowly drop after reading most of her answers to where, again, I'm not going to end up moving her on here. Next up, moving on to Lexus Jackson, a 24-year-old dental hygienist who I believe is also the former girlfriend of Drake, which is random, but Lexus is probably one of the people here that I don't have as great of a read on. Kind of similar to Donna, I don't really know how she's going to do in the game. Like, I kind of feel like she fits into that similar mold of someone that is kind of here for a showmance, probably going to end up in one. Doesn't seem like the most strategically minded person in the game, though I think can be social if she decides to be social, which again is kind of the issue with showmances, where while I think it can obviously lead to you having more influence in the game, usually most people don't utilize that and just end up thinking through their showmance, which ends up harming their long-term game. But she's someone that, again, like, I just don't know how to feel about her. I just don't really know how she's going to do in really any facet. So we're mixing that the fact that she's also on the younger side of things, which, to be fair, of Big Brother isn't as much of a detriment as it is with something like Survivor in my mind. Like, while I do think it, again, probably has you having less life experience than people older than you, at the end of the day, a lot of the cast is also still on the younger side of things. And we've had numerous younger winners of the show, people that are younger than Lexus herself. For me, Lexus is just a bit of an enigma. I could see her doing well. I also could see her not doing well. Where, again, my opinions of her are very similar to Donna, to where I'm not going to end up moving her on, despite there being some potential there. Next up, moving on to Matthew. Matthew, a 27-year-old kinesiologist, which Matthew here very much screams out as a recruit to me. He seems like someone that doesn't really know the show particularly well, is kind of here just because he got contacted to apply, and really, he does feel like one of the most generic casting choices on the board here. He feels like this very typical bro-y guy that's going to do well at comps, is probably decent enough socially, and probably won't know what he's doing strategically, to where, straight up, I mean, Matthew is kind of high on my power ranking of someone that I could see doing well. I mean, while I think there are red flags, in fact, that, again, I don't know how he is strategically in the game, I also feel like he is someone that does seem to have a somewhat big personality, obviously not in the grand scheme of things, but at least in comparison to people of his archetype, I could see him putting his foot in his mouth and potentially not being well regarded in the grand scheme of things. But I think there's still also potential of him being someone like a Drew Daniel, of someone that is like kind of naturally skilled for the game, or despite not having much knowledge of the game, could be decent enough socially to kind of carry them through the game. And again, I think it's a bit of a mixed bag for Matthew, where Matthew is someone that I think could easily win out. If he gets this anywhere close to the end game, I think he would be a pretty big threat to get to the end. But I do feel like it is how social he would be that is a bit of a question mark for me, where I just don't know how much, or I just don't know how good he is going to be socially. While I do think there is routes for him to do pretty well, I did not feel confident enough to move him on as a winner pick. Next up, moving on to Todd Clements, a 31-year-old general contractor, and Todd gives me nothing. I really don't know what to think of Todd. He just seems kind of bland. He seems like someone that was cast simply because he was from Labrador. I believe he is the first person ever from Labrador, so at least that's something. But he really just does not bring anything to the table in my mind. He does not seem like that interesting of a personality. His bio is extremely dull. Really, he just gives me nothing. I don't really have a good vibe from him at all. Now, again, there's definitely a chance he just gets into the game and is well-liked and gets kept around, but I just don't have any real sense of how he's going to do in the game. So again, not someone I'm particularly confident in. And the final person that we know for sure is on the cast is Vivic, a 25-year-old software developer. And Vivic is someone that I actually feel pretty good about. Now, I've seen some people online talk about not being high on him and getting this more douchey vibe from him. That's not really the vibe I personally got. Where, I mean, well, that definitely could be there. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I feel like that's not really the vibe I personally got. I feel like Vivic is someone that I feel pretty good about. I feel like he is a super fan of the show. Probably one of the biggest fans on this cast. Seems to talk about the game in a pretty articulate articulate way. Again, having the typical alliance of finding a ride or die and then building a 6-person alliance and riding to jury, then be more aggressive and manipulative towards the end of the game. Though I will say he does talk about how he needs to cut his ride or die at Final 3, which I think is a red flag there, and the fact that you don't need to. Where, I mean, it's better if you don't. It's better if you just make sure that you win the jury vote against your ride or die more so than cut your ride or die. But either way, again, he seems to be someone that has a lot of passion for the show, and that's something I do very much respect. And even beyond that, again, he's someone that I could see very much clicking with the more broy guys on this cast. Now, again, I do think there is this paradigm shift to where I would expect the broy guys to be targeted, but of those broy guys, I feel like he's probably the person that I have the most faith in strategically in the game, which to be fair might also put a target on his back. But to me, again, like, I feel pretty good about Vivic. I feel like there is the potential there to be a really well-rounded player to where, again, he is someone I'm moving on as a winner pick. But again, those are the 12 people that we do know of so far. Now let's talk about the mystery all-star house guests, where obviously we did learn that we have 2 all-star players coming back here, though their identities won't be revealed until the premiere. Again, cool that we're finally getting returning players when we began. Again, wish it was more than 2. I don't know why only 2. Why not 4 to make it a 16-person cast like they've typically had? Again, I think it's kind of a shame that BB Can has kind of wasted a lot of its really strong casting and not bring back these people ever. But either way, so again, based on how the cast is distributed here, I think it's pretty clear that the all-stars here, it's going to be 1 guy, 1 girl. And for the women's slot, I mean, like, I think it's very clearly Victoria from BB Can 9. I would be very surprised if it's not. And Victoria is someone that production clearly loved, was also a fan favorite, really played into everything production would want in terms of giving great confessionals, playing the game really hard, being this really fun personality. And it's also been extremely vocal about wanting to play again, to where, to me, I think Victoria is the biggest lock on the board. She perfectly fits a season like this as well. Again, she is someone that, again, is a big personality, big fan favorite, but not the best player in the world. And I think that's kind of who you'd want on a cast like this, to not have this more overtly domineering figure that can run the show from beginning to end. So again, I think Victoria perfectly fits this cast. And again, if Victoria is here, I would still not have that much faith in her, as it's Victoria, to where, again, she's probably going to make a big move at some point, completely blow up her game and get taken out immediately following that. That's kind of what I assume will happen with her. But again, someone that I'm personally excited to see back on TV. So at least there's that. The other person is a bit more up in the air. I don't think this person's as locked in. However, again, looking at just how I think this cast is going to break down, to where, again, I think it's going to be a guy. I think it's going to be someone not from BB Can 9, as I don't think they'll put 2 people from the same season. Looking at who production clearly loves, and also people that aren't confirmed to not be on the cast through having made appearances more recently. I think the other person is probably Anthony from BB Can 7, which isn't as locked in for me. This is just more so a guess, even though I'm pretty sure a lot of other people have the same guesses as well. And again, I do think Anthony would make sense from a production standpoint. Now, I will say I would not actually like Anthony on this season, in the sense that I think it's kind of a waste to have Anthony back with all newbies. Again, Anthony is one of the best players in BB Can history, one of the bigger recent names in the history of the show, to where I think bringing him back for this season feels kind of sucky. Though at the same time, it's like, when are they ever going to bring people back? And again, I still do want to see Anthony play again. I'm excited that we are going to see him play again if he is here, to where at the end of the day, I'm fine with it, but I do feel like it's a situation where ideally he would be playing against bigger names. And straight up, I think Anthony's in an interesting spot here. Now, again, like, running through my thoughts on Anthony, if he were to come back here, I do think Anthony will have a target on his back. I mean, he is going to be this big, domineering figure, this alpha guy, and is also a returning player to boot. I do think that is not a great spot on paper for Anthony, but at the same time, again, Anthony is one of the best players we've ever seen, but interestingly, the show didn't really hype him up as much at the time. Well, it's very clear that production likes him nowadays, and again, brought him back to host the roundtable for BB Can 9. I don't feel like the show really did him justice. They didn't really prop him up as much and really focused a lot more on the likes of Dean and Adam, to where I actually think he's coming into the season with not as big of a target as he should have. As again, on a returning season, he should be one of these players that comes in with no chance at all. Yeah, I don't think that's really the case here. Now, yeah, I think Anthony is going to play probably the same as he did last time, just probably with a bit more recognition of the jury, to where, again, I think it could lead to short-term success. I don't know if it's going to lead to long-term, especially if he does have this elevated target on his back. But again, I think if Anthony is here, I think it's going to be a very, very interesting ride. Very interesting to see how he plays, even though we won't get to see any of it on the feeds. There we go. I mean, that's all of the official cast, along with the people that I am expecting to be the returning All-Stars. Now, on to my winner pick. The top 3 that I ended up moving on here ended up being Avery, Ibrahim, and Vivic. We're straight up, even with the returning players, I still do have more confidence in a newbie to end up winning the season. Though obviously I do think depending on who that returning player is, it could shake up the dynamics a bit. But of these three, the first person I'm going to cut is going to be Vivic. And again, just because I do feel like there's probably a little bit more red flags with Vivic, to where, again, while I can see him doing very well, I feel like there's also potential flame out potential from him. For while he is the biggest fan of the show, again, I could see a world where he plays a bit too hard and potentially has a personality that doesn't rub people the right way. So again, I do feel like there are little red flags there to where I am not moving him on. But with that, it does take us to my final two of Avery versus Ibrahim. And really for me, I look at them as two sides of the same coin. I look at them as very similar style of players, but really for me, it really came down to which side do I think is going to win the game. Is it going to be someone from the typical broy guys that have typically won the game in recent seasons, obviously outside of Kevin Jacobs, or is it going to be someone from this contingent of the women that want to stick together and make sure a woman wins the season? And that's really what it came down to for me. And because of that, my winner pick for the season ends up being Avery. And again, I do feel like at the end of the day, the typical pick would be Ibrahim. I feel like he's someone that, again, fits perfectly into all the archetypes that would typically do well in BB Can, seemingly has all those skills. But I do feel like this cast seems to be very aware of that. And I feel like there is going to be this rejection of what has happened in the past, where I could very much see a lot of the non-broy guys teaming up to take out the broy guys. Now, again, if a returning player for this season ends up being Anthony, I think he is someone that could unify those broy guys and make them even more powerful. But I do still look at that contingent as pretty big targets. So I did want to go and pick someone from outside of that grouping, to where, again, I feel like Avery is the best choice outside that. Now, I do think Avery, again, has the red flags of talking about wanting to play the game with integrity and morally, and again, that's not great, but I feel like everything else about her is very strong. Like, I feel like if we are looking at a group where the women get to the end together, I feel like Avery is the person I would have the most faith in to win within that group. Where, again, like, to me, she comes off as a Casey Light, to where I don't know who is targeting Avery early on this season. She seems like a mostly chill. She seems like someone that should be able to bond well with most people in the cast. Also someone that, again, I do expect to still play, despite talk about wanting to play with integrity. I do expect her to still be playing pretty hard despite that. So again, I do feel like Avery is someone that, of the women on this cast, I do feel like the best about. I feel like she's the person that I do look at as the most well-rounded of the women on this cast, to where, considering the constant talk about wanting a woman to win this season, I feel like she was the person that I felt the most confident in here. So again, she is my winner pick. But with that, again, that is my cast assessment for BB Can 12. Now, obviously moving on, I'll be doing a review, player ranking, mid-season power ranking, as I typically do moving forward. Also, I will be streaming at Twitch at twitch.tv/TheMarine Review, where I'll be talking about BB Can as the season goes through, where I do stream every Wednesday and Sunday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern Time. So you can keep up with my opinions on the season there. Also, beyond that, we have a lot of other stuff going on. We have Survivor. We have Amazing Race starting up soon. We have Australian Survivor wrapping up. The Traders wrapping up. My challenge Battle for a New Champion review should be the next video coming out. Obviously, I just wrapped up my Big Brother ranking of every player, where the mega video of all those parts together is still coming out at some point down the road. And obviously I still have all of the typical content I make even outside that. So again, there's still a lot coming up. Stay tuned for all those things. But for now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.